Welcome to our Valentine's Day's edition
Oh, it's Valentine's today.
of,
That's true. This meaning we're going to talk about Valentine's?
I don't know, it's not in the list of the topics.
No. Okay, so the agenda for today is, like you said, it's going over the topics and trying to understand what, if anything, works for us.
Yeah, and we've made, and each came up with ideas,
Yeah.
and let's start with yours. Because mine feel a bit pale right now.
I don't think so, but okay. I don't mind starting. But before that, I'll start with what we talked about last time, which is that this needs to be. I feel very strongly that this needs to be a way for us to have a discussion. I know, again, I'm assuming, knowing you, that you feel more self-aware doing this in English. So it might feel a bit more foreign to you than doing it in Hebrew. But this needs to be something that is valid for the both of us. Even if nobody else is watching, if nobody else is consuming this content, which, like I said,
Impossible.
I think
It's going to be a big hit.
Oh, exactly. It's already a big hit. We just hit 100,000 followers.
Within certain circles, it is a big hit.
Yeah. So owing to that perspective that this needs to have value for both of us, and yeah, I guess you can add people who are interested in us personally into that circle. Okay. I have to say that one of my thoughts is that in 10 or 20 or 30 years, this might have value. It's because it's, again, personal value, right? It's because it's some kind of document of where we were and how we know what our thought process was, or just
Another coffee?
Sure, or just just the stuff that we might not remember in 30 years.
Probably most of it.
Hopefully.
Did we have a podcast
Exactly.
that time? No.
So, wait, do you want me to wait for the coffee?
No. Maybe the list of ideas. Maybe just short intro that we want to talk about each one.
Right. Okay. So
like the concept.
So the idea, like I said, so because this is something that needs to be that I would want this to be just like more than a framework for a podcast. I want this to be a framework for our conversation, right? So anything that is valid for our discussion, for me, is valid for this, right? I'm sure there are things that you don't want to talk about with me, but anything that is not off limits for our conversation is not off limits for this. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the structure cannot be, but I would rather it not be limited to a specific item or specific topic or a specific category, but we can start somewhere and then we can let it flow, right?
Well, knowing both of us, that's probably what's going to happen.
Right.
We're both kind of associative, or how you say.
Yeah,
so
associative is good.
That would probably be the case.
Right. So having said that, I started writing down topics, and then I figured that instead of talking about topics, I would rather talk about kind of subjects, or areas of interest, or perspectives, and then kind of dive into each one, and maybe we can just have like a 2 or 3 minute conversation about each, so that you understand what I'm talking about, and then you can tell me that it's good or bad or whatever.
Sure.
So this is associative order, right? This is not. I didn't think about. It's not an order of importance. But the first, and by the way, these, at least some of them.
Theology.
Yeah. We'll get to it. Don't jump ahead. But some of them are probably applicative to you as well, right? like I'll start with the first one. So personal, right? So personal. Obviously, you have your personal stories and your personal.
I
Again,
do.
I think we discussed Bulgaria a few times, but I think it's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
Again,
Yes and no. I visited that topic quite a lot with myself. I'm not sure of the value that it has.
well, again, I think even I'm not talking about the business perspective. I'm talking about the personal perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
It's an experience that is unique. Well, not unique, but it's uncommon. Just the way that this is situated and the decision. There's again, I think there's lots of, but again, I'm not talking about
There's lots of personal stuff that
right. So
to be talked about. Yeah.
right. So for
that's
me,
sure.
the thing I put down is the story of finding my biological father, which I think again you've heard it, right? You've
Yeah.
heard, I think, probably like 75% of it. So there's obviously stuff that you didn't hear.
I can't evaluate how many percentage.
No, I'm doing the
Because
evaluation.
you know the big picture.
But I think I skipped a lot of there's a lot of background, about the stuff that I know, the stuff that I don't know, but I think I know the stuff that I absolutely don't know about, where my parents were before I was born, in terms of their lifestyle and, how the decision making. So, that's certainly something that I'd be happy to talk to you about. And maybe we can have like a psychiatrist as a guest so that they can evaluate me.
I thought maybe more of a police detective.
Yeah.
Like it's a mystery.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a serial killer, true killer. How is it called? The podcast that
Which one?
I don't know. There was this podcast that made a lot of noise because it released, killer or something.
What? Really?
Yeah, that they, they take cases from the past and start solving them all over again with new witnesses and new technology, etc.
And then they manage to find the killer.
Either manage to find the killer or manage just to show you a lot of
Right.
hideous stuff.
Right. Okay. So yeah.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think that you have dad issues.
Yeah. So right. So finding my biological father is definitely a few podcasts. Talking about my non-biological father, right, the person I called dad all these years, is a few other podcasts because he was a very interesting person. Him and his family. I don't know if I can bring one of them because that would be very funny. But just even again, there's lots of content there that I think is, again, you don't know about that.
No.
You don't know anything about that because you came into my life relatively late. And of course, the person I never called dad, but who was effectively my parent, which is Achia, that married my mother, and that's, again, here we can bring Tzuf, which is his son, so definitely there's lots to talk about there. And this would seep into politics and history because that's what he does, and he's an intellectual, and he's a very interesting person, and we can bring him maybe. That's dads. Yeah, I do have daddy issues.
By the way, I don't charge much by the hour, so yeah, we can have a few episodes.
Well, you can have like 75% of the ad revenue. Okay, so once we hit like those hundreds of thousands of, we have a viewer. Oh, it's probably me. How can we already have a viewer? That's disturbing.
There's a bot that just looks at everything and records everything.
That's really weird that we would have a viewer. Okay. I didn't. Okay.
Can you see who this viewer is?
I don't know. I'm not a Twitch expert. I don't. I'm guessing that if there's a viewer, they need to be in the chat room. But, well, okay.
Yeah, okay. Our technology guy.
Right. Okay. It says we have 15 views, so people are tuning in and tuning out, which is interesting. So, like I said, 75% of the ad revenue can go to you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so, I definitely think that's an interesting topic because I feel, although I came late, I feel the influence and the struggles
that you have with this with this issue. And
Yeah,
you know,
again, you came at a very, like Edward Norton says at the end of Fight Club. You met me at a
strange.
very strange period in my life. So it existed before. Finding Isa really just strengthened my views on fatherhood.
Exactly. That's what I want to say. That I encountered that more with relations to your fatherhood and less with relations to
Yeah, and again, being a father obviously has some relevance. Again, I don't think, and this is part of the discussion, but I don't think there's such a thing as a good father. I think that dads, by definition, are crappy and terrible. I think that the separation into sexes for procreation in human beings and mammals and in general created, a separation of roles, and as the separation of the motherly role becomes more and more, again, good and evil are human ideas, but the mom is the good and the dad is the evil, as separation goes,
Yeah.
or as dichotomies go, or as discreteness goes. Anyway, so that's definitely one thing. Obviously, since we're mentioning my dads, I also have to mention my mother because that's another topic that's maybe a little more difficult for me. Um, and it's a little ancient, because my mom died when I was 18, so that's what, 20, 27, 28 years ago. So it's, but there's definitely stuff there, I'd
Yeah.
be happy to share and
Ne-
happy to talk about.
that I almost never heard. I'd say 10%.
Yeah, yeah. It's first of all, it's ancient past, right?
Mm.
So it's not. It's become. I like to say, and this is something that I didn't say myself. I heard from my literature teacher in school, but that losing a parent is the closest you can come to actually experiencing your own death, and I think the older you are, the easier it is, and for me, it happened at 18, which is probably the peak of my cognitive formation period. I have this discussion with Tzuf discussion. I have this uh, you know back and forth where we try to figure out which one of us got the shorter end of the stick, because she died when he was like 5, right? So he didn't really get to know. He doesn't remember her at all, right? And he's like, "Oh, I have it worse because I never got to know my mother." And I'm like, "You know what? I have those 13 years that I actually got to know her, and if she was a terrible person, I'd agree. But she was such a wonderful person that losing her is like, it's really something that I carry with me, and I've carried with me all these years. But when we met was 6 years ago, I think, right? 6.
2001 now, 5, 15. July, August 2015.
Yeah, so,
well, until I reached it was September, I think.
Right.
It took me like 2 months.
So it was already kind of closed in the box, and again, it's not like I don't feel like it's dealt with, and and I've come to terms with it, but I've learned to live with it, right? So it's just not there. So definitely, and again, there's lots of other personal stories, but okay, let's
yeah. Okay.
So, all right. So the next one is I don't know if sociology is
okay.
Right. So sociology is like a terrible term, but for me, everything. And again, you know about this, right? We had a few conversations about this.
Yes.
Obviously, the process that I've been. I would like to say last 5-6 years, but really it's the last 20. Right? It started way before, and it's what I put down here is relationship anarchy and non-monogamy, but it's wider than that. Mm-hmm. It's relationship dynamics in general, and it's something that, again, there's other topics in sociology that might be interesting. I think just to kind of cover the other ones, I think like race relations is something that, again, I've learned a lot about in the last few years, and I think it's really interesting. Again, it's hard for two white males to sit down and talk about this, but I I feel like there
It's
are
black
things. What?
It's black coffee.
Yeah, the coffee is black, right? And again, we could have maybe Leah in one of these. She would probably be happy to give her perspective. Um, but for me, if it comes to race relations and comes to privilege in general, which is definitely part
Yeah.
of what you can call sociology, it's
Did you see the Oscar-winning Parasites, the Korean
the movie. No, I
Yeah.
haven't. No,
Watch it, it's good.
you've seen it?
Yeah, I ordered on Amazon.
Oh, it's on Amazon.
Yeah, $3.99 renting.
It's fun. It used to be that the movies that were nominated for Oscars were still in the cinema
Yeah.
when the Oscars were announced, right? And they would actually make money off getting the awards, and now it's like they're making money off Amazon.
Though I think it's actually you can also find it still on the cinemas.
Yeah. No, but again, there's an overlap, right?
Yeah,
It
there's an overlap.
used to be that you'd have like an exclusive period for cinemas.
The Oscar season, and then
Right.
you had the Oscar season when all the movies would be released in order to
Right.
get the
Right, and then after you finish 90% of the cinemas, you'd get it on pay-per-view, right?
Uh-huh.
And in what used to be Blockbusters and all the video rentals, and then after that, it would go to the premium channels, HBO and Cinemax and Showtime, and then so there's like, but
So it goes now that for the first few weeks you can only buy it.
yeah,
You can't rent it,
right,
and then
Oh,
they
really?
Add, yeah,
Oh, wow.
Then they add the rent. So for example, they have here
That's
a movie I
interesting.
want to watch, Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah.
So it's on Amazon, but it's only for buying.
right.
So I'm waiting until it will be.
It's
full.
Matt Damon, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
should
don't
be
know.
should be a cool movie.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like you find some documentary about it, should be probably more interesting, or even just read a book about it. But it's
But who has the time?
that is true. Netflix, I haven't seen it yet, but they say that they're gonna introduce a speed button. You hear about that?
Yeah, I read about it.
So
The
there are,
patience.
well, there are a lot of but directors are coming out against it. But I have to say, there are a lot of movies that I think would actually be like Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. Seeing it
Okay.
in 2x is going to be an amazing experience. First of all, because all the fight scenes are going to be like comical, which is great, and it's just like just the amount of screen time where you
But
just
how
see
is
eyes.
how is the talking going to work? Like it's gonna be a train night or whatever.
No. So it's going to be fast. So they've had this pinned down for like a while now. You can see it on YouTube, where you it used to be that accelerating voice would also elevate the pitch,
Yeah.
but today it doesn't, right? So it's just faster talking,
Okay.
and because the sample rates are dynamic and adjustable, then you don't lose any of the data. So it's just faster talking. And again, I understand why it's like people are like, oh, it ruins the experience, but it's like Scorsese came out against it, but
Wow.
Scorsese used to make pictures for like the huge screen, right? Tarantino, right? Tarantino was like all about this like 35 by 1 format or whatever. It's like extremely wide screen. If you watch, Inglourious Bastard on Netflix on like a 14-inch computer screen, then you're already experiencing it differently, So I don't know. So
Yeah, but it has something a bit sad with I mean, the option, if it exists, put it out there. If you don't want, don't use it. But it has something sad that there's such a demand for something like that, because that's we're at sociology, so that's exactly one of the of the things that is happening to us, that we're losing.
Look, there's
we're
so
losing
much
our-
content that's being created, right? Have you seen Sons of Anarchy?
Season 1.
Right, so there's like 8 seasons, right?
Yeah.
Now let's say you wanted to watch Sons of Anarchy.
Well, you should suffer.
No, you do 3x, right? And you watch it 3 times faster.
And
you
they
don't-
talk 3 times faster. What about the
You don't
dramatic pauses?
But
when it sounds about
it's like it's like fast reading. It's like the difference between reading a book and taking you like a week to read a book, and it's a different experience. But I think I understand what you're saying about it's like you say sad. I don't know if it's sad. Obviously, the demand is there. because people have less attention spans are shorter.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think it's relevant that the amount of content that exists is insane.
Yes.
And it gets created so fast. So if you want to keep up, you need some way to condense. I think a better, interesting way, which might appear in the next few years, is abridged versions. Right now, you could say, well, Scorsese, for example. So because of you, I watched The Irishman. 3.5 hours of total time waste.
Watch it twice, in 2 times.
Yeah, I watched it in 2 times, right? And I had like a week, like pause between the first and the second part. It was just, and you can say, well, let Scorsese, take this movie and make an abridged version, but he won't, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can take an AI.
What is abridged like?
Take a machine learning setup, right, and ask it to create a 20-minute version of the movie, right? Not fast. Just take, take the good parts, make it stick, make the story stay there.
Well, the proportions, the proportions should be 20 minutes is too short. You can't show anything in 20 minutes.
You can, again, I can sit down and give you a description of The Irishman in 20 minutes and have you finish that and say, okay, I understand what the movie is about. I understand what, it's that 30 minutes, Again, I don't know, but I think that makes more sense. And then, you have the dramatic pauses and you have like, everything's there, but you just like, you skip over parts,
I'm dramatically pausing. Please join me.
Okay, I need to wet my nose.
I'm just
No.
I have good tissues. Don't use this. Don't be
All right.
We're both out of the frame. That's something that shouldn't happen.
For our one viewer, I can't believe we have a viewer.
Hey viewer.
Hey viewer. I don't know.
How do you know who? I don't want to. I need more control.
Control over what?
Of what's going on. Who is watching us? Where is he? Why is he?
I really don't know. Again, I think they're supposed to be like, I've watched Twitch people, so they know who's on chat, but maybe just because somebody's viewing doesn't mean that they're on chat. So maybe, users in chat, broadcaster. Oh, yeah, here. So you can actually go on the channel and be in the chat and say something if you want. All right. I'm going back to the list. So, yes. Where was I? I was talking about
sociology, relationship, right. Privileged. Okay, so I think that we've got the point of this.
Yeah, again, it's a lot of it is personal, obviously, because it's my personal perspective. But again, I think actually this is something I think we can get into real discussions about, because I think when it comes to like interpersonal, it's me saying or you telling me stories, and I'm telling you stories, and the best we can do is like ask each other questions. But here, I think we'll probably have some arguments. We don't agree on everything, so that might be more interesting. All right, theology. Right. So again, theology for me.
Is it something that you think about? Like
yes, it's been on my mind for quite some time. You know, the first time I left Israel to the States was in 97. Well, yeah, it was 94, but 97 I went and I lived in San Francisco for 5 years, and it dawned on me that I'm traumatized. You know, that I've been pushed into a corner.
You lived there with Kami?
Yeah, in Berkeley.
Really? 5 years? Just after
it's interpersonal.
Just after the army?
No, so a little bit. After the army, I finished my service in '94. We went there for a few months. Very interesting tales that I had, again, interpersonal. but basically, we stayed in Florida with my dad at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, that's how I call him to
My dad
differentiate
at
him.
the time.
So we stayed there for a few months. Very difficult time, very hard. A lot of personal growth for me. This is where I started doing like HTML work, and I learned, how to build websites. But it was really hard. My dad was he lost all of his money. He got scammed by his partner, and it was very difficult. So we came back after a few months. We actually split up. And then we got back together, and I worked when I came back. I worked for PF1, which was the Israeli representative for Netscape.
Mm-hmm.
So again, kind of building on what I learned. And then we started Corkinet, which is a whole different chapter.
Yeah.
That we need to talk about. But we can. Corkinet, and then after Corkinet went belly up, I worked for Amdocs for a few months just to get money. Well, I was actually hoping that they would relocate me, but that didn't really pan out. And then I worked as a freelance for a few months. We got some money, and then we moved. Yeah, we landed in San Francisco with 2 tourist visas and about $5,000, and that's it, and 2 backpacks. And we stayed for 5 years. Legally. No, we managed to figure out. Yeah. She got a student visa. She was going to the Academy of Arts College, which is today it's the Academy of Arts University. And I at first I went back and forth, and I did some projects for Israeli companies, and then I found BroadSurf, Icon.
Yeah.
And I got my L1. Different stuff.
Okay.
From the past. So moving there, I realized that I'm traumatized when everything that has to do with Judaism. I've studied theology, and I've read a lot about mysticism. I went through all the mysticism.
Mysticism.
Including Jewish ones. I read the Kabbalah, a few of the books. But I've gone into Hinduism. I've read the Popol Vuh. I went like, again, this is early on, like 16, 17, 18. I plowed through all religions, and I kind of looked for stuff, and I found lots of interesting stuff. I was, and I still am a skeptic. So for me, it's like I look at it, and I always try to analyze it and understand how it relates to me, and what part of it is bullshit, and what part of it is crowd control, and what part of it actually comes and gives you some kind of understanding of the world, right? But leaving Israel, I realized that when it comes to Judaism, I've been branded. I have pain. It's not just religion. It's also, for example, Holocaust Remembrance Day. The way that we grew up. Like I have a strong memory, which is a traumatic memory, even though it doesn't seem that way. Staying school on Holocaust Day when I was 5, and watching TV and seeing, the images of a bulldozer just, moving bodies into like mass graves. Yeah, it was, but it was on purpose. It's not like it wasn't a mistake. It was purposefully built to traumatize you. And when it comes to Jewish beliefs, I grew up believing, which is a funny word, that there's one way to be Jewish, right? That the Orthodox way is the way to be Jewish and nothing else. Yeah. And you're either with them or you're against them, right? We say Chiloni. Chiloni is not just secular. It's something that secular is like, I don't care, I don't practice. Chiloni in Israel is you make a stand, right? And you have to make a stand, because if you don't make a stand, then you become part of that, So, again, leaving here the first time, it opened up, I actually, when we were in San Francisco, and again, I'm not a religious person, completely. I think religion is terrible. We can talk about Bill Maher, that's a different category, but I have lots of problems with the guy, but I also really like some of the stuff that he's talking about. So there's a movie called Religulous, which is Religulous, which is about about the way that religions are just a way to control people. Never mind. So I'm definitely not a religious guy, but I have I have beliefs like every human being, and I have a spiritual side that's been subdued and kind of in sort of an arrested development, but it's there, my spiritual side. The first time I left Israel, I opened up to it a little bit, and I realized that there were other ways, but it wasn't really significant. The second time, it was, this is 2013, it was even stronger, and now that they have children, it becomes a bigger challenge because I don't know how to interact with them, and I don't know how to I don't want them to have the same trauma as me, right? And they're already being pushed, right? Because they already have, again, their education is Chiloni.
Yeah, there's a very clear path here, and as you say, it's I would say all devil's planning by Ben Gurion to create the new Jew here in Israel,
right?
And how what would make the best chances of surviving? Let's scare them, make them aggressive. Wow, that's
right, and it's even worse than that because Ben Gurion, being an ideologist but also being an opportunist, brought in Chabad to kind of take over that piece and redefine it, and Jewish orthodoxy in Israel is it's different from Jewish orthodoxy in the States, right?
Of course,
it's
they work in
just like
and so definitely and definitely I think that every when you go and move and live somewhere else, you definitely get perspective on everything in life, and there are things that catch you more and things that catch you less, and from my experience, it's also the reflection on the kids is really where you find yourself and you say, hey, that's something, something's different here. And what is that thing? Having said that, I must say that this is going to be a topic that will be similar to the personal one, in which you talk and I just ask questions, because it's really a topic. Maybe I need to do a podcast. Why is that? But it's something that I don't read about. I don't care about. I don't think about.
So you used three verbs there. You said read, care, and think. And I think these are, again, read. Obviously, you don't read if you don't care, and obviously you don't care if you don't think. But again, I can tell you, and we might be very different in this regard. But I'm gonna guess that you do feel that you're Jewish. Yes. Right? Because you come from
I have a very strong sense of tradition.
Right, and there's a big question of how that tradition translates into your personal connection to the spiritual world, right? Because again, we've had discussion about this, and we'll go down the line because we have science, which is next, which is really, I think, one of the things that propelled me towards this, right? A few things propelled me, right? I said leaving Israel, meeting Leah. And Leah defines herself as religious. Again, I don't think she's religious because she falls out under Jewish renewal, which is not really a religion. It's more like a spiritual way of life. Yeah. But she definitely she appreciates the practices. She's relatively new, right? She only has 13 years of experience, right? She's come into this. She has lots of questions, which some of them I can answer, which makes me feel great, that I'm bringing something that's, personally. Part of it is finding my dad, right, my biological father, and realizing that I'm, part of a lineage that goes back to the not the Rebbe Milubavitch, but the real guy, right, Zalman Schnell, right? So there's a lot of things there.
As a rabbi.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to. His beard was like all the way down to here.
And it is a day for a hat.
A hat.
A hat.
Yeah.
Just a minute. Pause.
You want me to pause the stream? No.
No. You can talk.
I can talk. Hey, chat. I hope it's probably not very interesting, is it? That's fine. This is not for you. Alright, where's the channel? So Shai is peeing. That's maybe a little bit more information than we need to know, actually. Let's see. You're live. Manage stream. Wait, so they're showing me views and viewers. Oh, our viewer is gone. We were too boring for our viewer. So he's gone. Manage your chats. Our viewer is gone.
Yuri?
Our viewer is gone.
Our viewer is gone.
Yeah. Oh no, we have two viewers now. What the hell? Oh, maybe I'm one.
That's what you said last time.
No, there is one viewer. Hey, viewer. But he's not saying anything. So maybe he's just like jerking off or something. But it's fine. It's fine.
If we are the subject of his jerking off,
I'm happy to be of
Yeah.
assistance.
the situation is best.
Right. You want to talk about your P? No, you can.
That's under science.
That's understanding. So
So theology, let's say.
no. So I just again, I want to just because I think, like you say, oh, I'm just gonna ask questions. I think again, I'm not. There's no. I don't feel that there's a unlike talking about polyamory or talking about relationship dynamics and talking about kink and all that. I don't think that probably the discussion here is also very personal, right?
Mhm.
Because again, but I think that if you say, "Oh, I've never thought about this and I don't care about this," I think that there's obviously some kind of repression here, right? Because it's a part of our life,
Yeah.
and since you do feel a connection to you say Jewish tradition, I think that the word tradition,
Jewish Eastern European tradition.
right? And I think, by the way,
It's shunt in the winter.
I think that this is part of it. The Chiloni way of life or the Chiloni way of thinking is the separation of tradition and spirituality.
Mhm.
And so I'm connected to the tradition, but the spirituality doesn't talk to me and I don't care about it. And the reality is that tradition without the spirituality is almost useless. Okay, tradition is all about looking at the meta, looking at the metaphysical layer of what it is to be human and where you come from and what it means, and it's all about that.
I'm not sure I'm agreeing.
Okay.
I don't agree with you on that, but
Okay.
that would
So
be
that's a discussion.
Yeah, one discussion.
Okay. So the next one is science. So, and I separated obviously science and technology. And there's lots of stuff we can talk about under science, obviously.
Yeah.
I do have a lot of popular knowledge, right? I'm not a scientist, as I like to say, but I do have a lot of popular knowledge. But for me, science is like the interesting discussions that I think we could have are directly related to everything we've talked about up till now, right? The personal side, the sociological side, the theological side, also the things we will talk about, the technological side, and psychedelics and all that, because science is a way to explain things, right? What I said before about theology, so I said, moving out of Israel, I said, meeting Leah, meeting my dad, finding my dad. The science part of it is also important. What I've learned, what I've come to understand over the past 5-6 years, in terms of how we can define nature around us, has given a lot of weight to spirituality. Okay, spirituality was something that I put aside, and it's like a pet. It was it's nice and it's cool, and it's maybe usable in certain areas, but I never gave it like serious thought.
Until you connected it to technology?
Science.
To science?
Science, yeah. So, because when I look at the way the scientists today are able to define the world around us, the way it works, the way it functions, the reasons why things happen and the way things happen. Again, the why is a big question, right? Why, nobody has an answer for why, but it is not specifically, or is not it doesn't have to be outside of the realm of science. The explanation of why, why is an interesting question, right? And the best explanations we have today are overlapping with a lot of spiritual traditions that we have, right? And the way that, again, Judaism in some ways, Buddhism and Hinduism in many other ways, I see a lot of correlations there.
And how is the quantum universe related? You have, by the way, if you're talking about quantum, you have a WhatsApp message.
My
When you're
WhatsApp is
quantum-
closed because
when
I'm
you're quantum-
streaming and I didn't want to.
Yes, you're right. I'm closing
What?
it as
What
well.
does? No, it's okay. And my battery was dying. So,
Yeah, no.
what do we have? September meetup. He said he's not going to talk to her. He's such an idiot. It's his words. I love it for his words.
I love your multitasking. So first of all, yeah, it's interesting that you say that the science gave spirituality, in your case, a push. And I think that me as a much less non-scientist than you, I think there is more and more, at least, talks or connections exactly between that, also in the scientific community. Like the understanding that a lot of things that were not considered science or that were something else out of the fence in a way are now being more looked at and more seriously approached.
Right. So obviously, again, science is very, very broad, right? What I wrote here, the quantum universe,
and the end of humanity.
Right. So
I mean, that's our blockbuster. The end of it. Nobody's going to log on for the quantum universe, but the end of the
But
humanity,
it's the same thing. No, it's the same thing. The quantum universe is, again, it's a terrible term because the universe is not. It's just a way for us to describe the universe, right? But what we're doing today is, and again, the reason why I bring the spirituality into this is because, the story about the Buddha is that he sat under a tree and he reached enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
And he basically disconnected. And there's lots of books and lots of stuff written about what this disconnection means. And I think that this is like we are fast approaching the point where science provides our technological momentum with the tools to reach that point technologically, okay? Where we can reach enlightenment. We can press a button and be there. And again, lots of Buddhists are going to go, no! But, it's obviously it's different because every experience is different.
It makes it just much more secular and operational than
again, Buddhism is pretty secular. Buddhism is not a religion.
Yeah, but in the meaning of if the enlightenment can be achieved with pressing a button, first of all, it means that there is a pattern to this enlightenment, and it's something
right. And I would argue that there's a pattern for everything. And obviously, the when I define enlightenment as something that exists at the press of a button, it's obviously a different thing from one that you take 20 years of meditation to achieve. It's a different path. It's a different experience, right? I had a really interesting conversation.
You call both of them the same, so
no,
there's very much in common.
I'm saying that I'm saying that there are similarities, there are parallels, and that what we are moving towards. When I say the end of humanity, I mean that humanity is defined by a set of behaviors, by the fact that we have a brain that remembers the past and feels like the past is immutable and real, but doesn't know the future and is working to predict. The brain is working to predict the future all the time, and based on the success of those predictions, it modifies behavior, right? So causality is a really big, important part of this, right? Mm-hmm. If causality goes away, everything falls apart, right?
Yeah, but if causality goes away, it means that there's some kind of fraction in the time.
No.
In time. Yeah.
No, that's not true. Again, we'll talk about this. It's not true. It's true if your perspective of time is from that of a human mind. Okay, the human mind,
A
experiences.
disclaimer: my perspective is from a human mind.
No, but again, the human mind is able to abstract. So you can actually look at the universe. Like if you're describing the experience of two black holes merging, it's not a human mind that provides a perspective, right? Because it's impossible, right? If you talk about things that we are able to observe, like interference, quantum interference, like time dilation, there's no human perspective that can actually present something that's close to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we kind of understand, or we're working towards understanding the fact that time is relative, right? The time for you and time for me, even though we're feeling like it's flowing together for both of us, they're totally separate.
Yeah.
Just like we're not occupying the same space, we're not occupying the same time, right? It's just another dimension, and we are kind of traveling almost together. So we are able to, but again, my point is that we'll go into this. We'll definitely have more than one discussion for sure. I'd be happy to, but I think there's something about the human experience that requires a certain path to achieve a certain goal, right? Like if I give you ice cream and you eat the ice cream, or if I make you work for 7 years to get the ice cream, the taste of the ice cream is going to be different.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just because it's going to be 7 years old. It's because there's the patterns that your brain is going to create. So obviously, every experience is different. But when you talk about the spiritual description of what nirvana is, right? What does it mean? This disconnection, right? This complete
disconnection between what?
So it's a disconnection between the essence, right? This thing that exists, the metaphysical essence that exists within us, and everything else that exists in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So disconnection from memory, disconnection from desire, disconnection from motivation, disconnection from everything, right? It's complete disconnection, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a shedding of everything that, again, what Buddha says ties us down, right? All the chains that force us into this world of suffering, right?
Yeah.
So he was able to, maybe not, but what the story tells us is that he was able to disconnect, right? By the way, and again, we'll go into this, but I think that disconnection actually means that the person who continued talking after that out of Buddha's body doesn't necessarily have to be Buddha, right? There's no, if there was true disconnection, then there's no.
Would you need someone else to be disconnected in order to?
Again, it's like if you take his consciousness, you suck it out of his body, right? And now you have like a tiny amount of liquid. It is his consciousness, and you drop it into an ocean, right? And now you take a bit out of the ocean, you pour it back into his body. It's not the same, right? Because it loses, once you lose memory, once you lose connection to everything that makes you human, then what's the difference, right? And when you connect back, you actually connect back to all the memories that Buddha has, right?
Yeah.
So the memories are retained in the brain, right? Memories are not real, right? Memories, well, they have physical manifestation because they exist as chemical connections or electrochemical connections in the brain, but they don't represent the real past. No, right? So, whatever, if there is a metaphysical entity that operates the mind, that metaphysical entity, when he tries to remember what happened yesterday, it is wholly dependent on that memory that exists in the brain. Yeah. It's not part of that metaphysical entity.
Right.
And the proof is that you can actually stamp out parts of the brain and person stops remembering, right? Or you can actually introduce new memories into the brain that didn't really exist, right? So, okay. So that's, again,
scary.
But science obviously is a much, like, I'm assuming this is kind of why we started this, right? We started talking about the podcast, I think, a year ago.
I think that we did a try in the States.
Yeah, we did a voice one, and I don't know what happened with that. I think a few people listened to it, and that was it.
Maybe it's going to be like Sugarman, you know, we're going to get one day to, I don't know, a faraway country, and then we'll understand that everybody heard the podcast over there. They just don't know how we look, and you know, they're big fans. And do you see Sugarman?
No.
Watch it. It's a nice documentary.
Sugarman?
Sugarman. Yeah. Sugarman. There was a period when it was on the cinemas that they play this song all the time in the radio.
Okay.
It's a cool movie.
So science was one of the places we started talking about. So obviously there's lots of stuff there, and you know, we can have discussions about quantum mechanics, about quantum information, and quantum computing. We can bring a lot of people.
Some of them even are going to be interesting.
Anybody we bring, you know, I'm not gonna. If we bring a thief, for example, this is not going to be a discussion about, you know, the fidelity of superconducting qubits, right? That's not interesting to anyone, myself included. It's going to be just that. It's going to be a discussion. And again, Asif, I think, will be probably shy away from this discussion, but this is a discussion about what does, scientifically, obviously, not just, but at least from a like initial frame of reference of science, what does this mean, right? How does this translate into the only experience that we can have, which is a human experience, right? Yeah. So, like I said before, I talked about, you know, black holes or whatever. The human experience is not able to encompass that, but you have some kind of translation mechanism, right? It's like having infrared goggles, right? So we can't see infrared. It's out of our experience. We cannot never see in infrared. But you can have a device that takes in infrared light and translates it into light waves that we can see. And then you see something that is not, it's not infrared, right? But it's some kind of it's a translated experience, right? It's transposed into your senses. So the same goes for, you know, black holes. Math is definitely a great tool that can be used to do this transposition. Although we have to always understand that when you use math, you lose something, right? At least discrete math. And non-discrete math is not something we can't really perceive non-discrete math. So it's like, I think I told you, when I told Nico and Yuli that, you know, there are two things in life: the things that I don't know and the things that I know that are wrong. You know, these are like the two categories of things. And Yuli said, "Oh no, that's not true, because there are things we know are right." And I was like, "What?" And it says 1 + 1 = 2. And I said, you know, it's nice, but you just invented something called 2, and you defined that something called 2 as equal to 1 + 1. So this is not a truth. This is your definition, right? I could have said numbers go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 2, 4, 6, 8. And then 1 + 1 = 3, and 3 + 3 = 7, right? I just defined it differently. But the truth is that in reality, there is no 1 anywhere in reality. And there is no 2. It doesn't exist, right? Like you can choose to define things a certain way. You can say there's one sun. Okay, so now you've defined it, but there's no such thing as a one. There's no one sun. It's a process. It's non-discrete.
Yeah. For me, it's a little bit of jumping over, because there are. I understand your point, but I do see. I think that trying to deny some, like, yes, there is one sun in our solar system.
That is not true. The solar system can be defined as part of the sun, first of all. Again, just depends, for example, on the time frames. Like, what you're seeing now is almost like a snapshot, right? And you're looking at the snapshot and you say, oh, I see this is one entity. If you look at the film that shows you 5 or 10 or 15 billion years...
I understand. Of course, that 10 billion years ago, things were different. But it doesn't change the fact that at that snapshot, you have some information that it is material, or is, I'm afraid to say true, or something like that.
It's not true. That's the thing. It's, again, so this is science. Science tells us that it's not true. Science tells us that the place that it becomes discrete, the place that it becomes true, is within our consciousness, within our minds, right? The Copenhagen interpretation came came in and said, well, when an observer looks at the system, the observer collapses the system. It's silly,
Yeah.
It's again, it's a nice perspective. It solves problems that now you understand how the physicist is able to make experiments, but that in itself shows you that outside of the observer's perspective, this doesn't exist, right? So just like there's not one cat that's alive or dead, but there's a superposition of cats that are alive or dead, which is something that makes no sense. It's just it's the same for the sun. The sun is, you can't really, again, even if I subscribe to your human perspective and I ask you, where does the sun end? When the sun ejects material, is it now no longer part of the sun? When does it, how do you define it?
So again, I'm saying I understand all of that, and when I was in India, we traveled with a guy that basically flipped a little bit in Israel. Too many drugs, and he used to sit and talk for hours about the fact that who is he, because his particles are changing all the time, and like 90% of our body is going to be changed within and all of that. And I'm saying that for me, I grasp it as a very nice theoretical experience, but it's not something that I can feel or
right. But your feelings, your perception is wrong. Okay, you've watched optical illusions, I'm sure.
Yes.
That's the best way to show you that the way that you perceive things is not the right. It doesn't give you any indication on their truthfulness, right? So just because, again, when I pick up the glass, I feel definitely, I don't have an argument here that I'm separate and the glass is separate, and I can pick it up and I can put it down, right?
Exactly.
But again, that's not true. That's a misconception. That's a misperception, right? This is because the way I perceive things is challenged by my brain. My brain keeps on working at trying to create patterns that are inducive to survival, right?
Yes.
The brain has evolved as an agent for survival, right?
Okay.
So the brain works in kind of putting patterns together. By the way, all you have to do is take some mushrooms or acid, and it changes, right? It changes. Your perception changes. And yes, I don't know if you've had this feeling before, but on mushrooms, a lot of the times you lose that sense of separation, right? You sit on the couch and you feel like you're part of the couch, right? Or you touch something and you don't understand exactly where the barriers are. And you can say, oh, no, you're just high. But no, this is just a different way to perceive things. Okay, so again, okay, that's science. Again, science is part of it, I guess. What are you talking to Asif? Is that what's happening?
No. Shir from New York. We had a rough day yesterday, so I'm just hearing a little bit about it. Now, your next topic is something that I can
What's my next topic?
relate to very strongly.
Technology. Okay.
Startup experience.
So again, first of all, obviously technology can be, we can have a discussion about machine learning. We can have a discussion about cryptocurrencies in specifically, or about distributed systems.
We have good guests for crypto.
Yeah, really?
Jonathan.
There are no good guests for crypto by definition. But
what other I would say lines of technology, or I don't know, spheres in technology, do you have these kind of emotions as you have to crypto, like something on the
gambling?
Okay, gambling.
Human trafficking. Online advertising. There's lots. Yeah, there's a few others.
You want another Karich, by the way?
Yeah, you can, of course. So, Yeah, let's finish on my topics, and then we can have a break.
Yeah, I need to finish around 11:45 because I have a call set with Roy that was unexpected when I set our
No problem.
call.
No problem.
We will see what.
Why is there like a red thing? Oh, because it's recording. So again, technology. There's lots of obviously subjects that we can cover. We can even have a discussion about online advertising. I don't mind.
I would like to have some post-mortem about Just Cause.
So when I said startup experience, I was actually talking about just that, right? So Just Cause, Ontic, Iron Source.
Was Ontic ever born? Was Ontic ever alive? Or was it like a
No, it was.
miscarriage?
So now you're going back to science and theology. When does life start?
Yes.
Right. So obviously, Ontic, I feel like it was alive because we put lots of energy and effort into it because we have a logo and we have a deck and we have idea and we knew what we wanted to do, and there were other people beside you and me that knew what Ontic was and wanted to be a part of it or thought about being a part of it, and but it failed really early on, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe a miscarriage is a good analogy, but maybe like month 7, like somewhere in the third trimester. Mikamoni, and Squibber and everything that happened there. That's an interesting. So I have lots of experiences,
Yes.
failed ones and good ones. Coconut,
But I feel that a startup experience is not under technology. Like AI, blockchain, that's technology. Startup experience is something else. It's
so
not
that's
sociology, but
so I'm putting this under personal.
exactly. It's under personal.
Although
it's
all right.
It's personal and of course with the technological aspects, but
Okay, fine. Again, like I said, I doubt that any of our conversation is going to be limited. So if we start talking about blockchain, we're gonna.
it's politics, it's everything.
Yeah, I didn't put politics down, by the way.
Yeah, no, because
Because politics is everywhere, and politics doesn't really stand on itself. I think is a subject for me. Politics.
Well, but you can say
politics and economy.
But you can say the same about personal, right? Your personality, is
no.
all
What do you
around.
mean? I can talk purely about my experience of finding my biological father, and that would be the center of conversation. That would be the only thing we talk about. I can't say the same for politics. I can't say
Well,
the
depends.
same
You can say about politics in your Vada Bite or
No, I'm talking about my personal interest.
Okay.
I'm not sitting down and having a discussion about Republicans versus Democrats, about Trump's impeachment or whatever. It's not an interesting topic for conversation, right?
Okay.
It can definitely come up, and it will come up, right? Politics will come up if we talk about startup culture. Politics will come up if we talk about theology.
Startups?
Yeah. Talk about theology, politics will come up. Same for economics, by the way. So economics is also a subject that will come up in many things and is probably an interesting and important subject. But I wouldn't want to have a discussion that's centered around capitalism. As
I understand that.
we talk about the end of humanity, we will definitely be touching on capitalism because it's there.
Yeah. So just another. The 4 coffees are giving their.
You're peeing again.
I'm peeing again. Yes.
European. Okay.
Yaka, it became a bit chilly, no? You're chilly, Artzke.
Yeah. No, I'm good.
So,
Okay.
is AI together with quantum technology going to be the end of the humanity? And
Definitely not AI, because, like I keep telling you, AI is an acronym for two things that are both not really interesting in terms of, um, the next stage and how it relates to the singularity. Because the A stands for artificial, and the I stands for intelligence. And it, whatever it is that is going to take us, across this threshold, is not going to like being called artificial. And I think, again, this is a discussion that I have had with Ramon. I feel like intelligence is something that is very human. It's human centric. And then, Almog's response to that is that, intelligence exists in systems of entities, regardless. Like, for example, he says a forest of
Plants.
trees is intelligent. And I think, you know what? That's not what I call intelligence. Just because something has the capacity for survival and something shows autonomy, doesn't mean that it's intelligent, because intelligence is something that it's hard to define.
Yeah.
Right. And when you have intelligence quotient measurements, they usually fail because they're very culture specific and they have bias, etc.
Yeah.
But I think that creating a real process that is autonomous and that has the capacity for growth and much easier access to resources, and therefore also technology, is what it's about, right? So we're going to be creating this entity, right? An autonomous entity that's going to interact with us, right, in some way. And that entity is going to either take us across the threshold or kill all of us. I don't know.
Okay, so your last topic.
Last topic is psychedelics. I didn't do mushrooms yesterday. I'm going to do mushrooms today. You know that there's almost instant tolerance that you get.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But I thought it was 2 weeks, and I've experimented with a week, and a week is already it's good. And I read about it, so after 4 or 5 days, it really the drop off is exponential. So again, I wrote psilocybin. Obviously, it's not the only entheogenic, but for me, again, I wrote psychedelics, but I think it's entheogens more. It's, for me, it connects to science, and it connects to technology, and it connects to spirituality and theology, right?
Mm-hmm.
My personal experience, and it's not that great, because I don't look at cannabis as a psychedelic per se. It's very different. So for me, the discussion here that's interesting is around, what the experience is, what it means, how does it connect to the human condition in general, how does it connect to culture, and how does it connect to technology.
It's a very similar talk that we had in science, I think.
Yeah,
but from
a different perspective.
From a different perspective.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that.
And theology is there as well, of
right,
course.
Right, and the tradition from Siddhartha to Buddha must have had some kind of psychedelic
aspect to it.
As is Yechezkel and his visions, as so I think, just like again, when my kids ask me if God exists,
You tell them he's in the details.
No, I'm not trying to be a smart ass with my kids. But I tell them that,
You're saying that after you told your kid that 1 + 1 is not 2. So
but
you're
it's
not.
not, but it's not, right? Again, it is because that's how you define it, but it's not true in nature.
That's the definition of a smartass. Yeah.
No, by the way, 1 + 1 in reality is not equal to 2. Like if you take anything and it might be very close to 2, so you wouldn't notice, but if you do it enough times,
Yeah.
it will not be true. Okay? If you do 1 + 1 many, 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 many times, you will not, at some point you won't get to. That's how it works, It's
Okay.
like, again, because of the way that you define 1 and the way you define 2. Right? So 1 apple + 1 apple is, never mind. Anyway,
It's an apple.
my point is, that I think you cannot deny the existence of God, just like
The
you cannot
existence of.
God,
Okay.
just like you cannot deny the existence of Pikachu, right? They obviously exist. We know about them. We know a lot about them. There's an agreement between people on a lot of things that are related to them, and there's disagreement about a lot of things related to them. But the difference between God and Pikachu is that Pikachu, was created in a certain place by a certain person, and God as an idea was created in virtually every human civilization that
Yeah.
came to be, right? So obviously there's something there, and I believe that entheogens had a big part. They played a big part in this
Who?
departure, the psychedelics that have been used for religious purposes, right? When you look at the way that religions emerge, there's something there. There's something that creates that propels the human mind into a place where it's not bound by the things that you described, by this feeling that, this is where I end and the sun is one, and because as long as you're there, like the Buddha said, you're blind, you can't really see, and you have to close your eyes to be able to actually see. So that's psychedelics.
Okay.
Okay.
So looking at minds, they feel now like different perspectives to the same thing, which reflects the personal place I'm in life now. Like I don't know, between starting all over again and lingering to see what's the new stuff, and especially trying to build and progress myself in a very mudat way. So the first topic that I wanted that I thought would be interesting to talk about is jump starting yourself, and that's something that I think is relevant to all aspects of life. It's not only with work, for example. Ronan didn't try to code for 5 years. How can it be done? And I just looked because she has her bat mitzvah. I just looked at old photos, and I realized how much we used to travel, and I realized how much we're not traveling this last couple of years. And I know that we're not traveling, not because of I don't know, we have to be here or financial reasons, etc. It's because we've lost something along the way with the wish or the will or the need or whatever it is, and of course I can say that this jump starting is something that can affect you in every place in life, and it's a little bit like we talk about it's a substitute to what we said about
Rejuvenation, yeah.
Rejuvenation. So
Jump starting, the term for me means that there's something that there's some kind of engine, right?
Yeah.
So the assumption is that you have a process, by the way, a process that is not a standard process, right? Because otherwise it's just starting. But there's a process where you expend some amount of energy in a way that makes the engine run, right? And then when you end the jump start process, if it ends successfully, then now you have a machine that's going, right?
Yes.
And I think that's for me that's so jump starting yourself means that you are recognizing that something is not working, and you again this is a fine subject to talk about. By the way, didn't do anything yesterday, so that's a minus for me.
Apropos jump starting.
Yeah, um, but it's finding a way or finding the right process to move yourself to a place where you are actually the things are working,
Yeah.
right? That your engine is running.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, it started as a feeling more regarding work, because I'm coming out of a year which was very hectic, and I did a lot of stuff in it, but it felt in the air all the time. It felt that there was no strong attachment to,
Right.
and that's a place that I think that it was fun being there.
Okay.
But in order to get things really done, you need to, about myself, I need to, I don't know if it's focus or constant, but to get something more real, and that doesn't feel as a side project, that like to dive into something. And for me, that's where I need to do work. I need to do this jump start in order to get to that place, because
Right.
the other place is so comfortable. And
Right.
I mean, you have your once in a while thoughts. Okay, this is in the air. I want to find something, but most time it's comfortable. It's interesting. You touch a lot of things.
Right.
You can choose. You can cherry pick to do the things that you like, or like more.
I think a big part of this, a big question, is the question of motivation. What is motivation?
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, like, you don't jumpstart your car unless you really need to get somewhere. Especially if your car's starter is broken, right? So you don't jumpstart your car just because you want to hear the engine running. You really need to get somewhere, and more than that, you really need to get somewhere where you cannot get to without your car, right? So you have to, like, you need the car, and there needs to be a really jump starting a car. I'm sure you've done it before. Is not a fun process, right? It's annoying, and it's physically challenging, and it's not easy. Not to mention that you need like a stick shift, but it's like you need a good reason to do this, right? And unless you have a good reason, it doesn't happen. So I think a discussion about jumpstarting yourself needs to focus, at least in part, in what does the motivation framework look like? What are the motivations? And like you said, I feel like I'm stuck, but at some level, it's comfortable, right? Like, let's say, for example, that you would have a constant flow of money coming in, right? So you'd have absolutely no financial worries, and then maybe that will completely destroy any chances of you jumpstarting anything, right?
It might.
But then again, I think maybe the discussion can kind of pivot into, what are the motivations, right? Because even if you have like $1 million coming every month, you're probably not just going to sit around and eat ice cream. There are things that you want to do. So you talked specifically about jumpstarting something, jumpstarting your work environment, and finding like a way to work somewhere and make money, etc. But I think it's maybe a larger discussion of what motivates you and how you do jumpstart that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting.
How do you jumpstart your motivation? Yeah. The second, my second topic is Tim Robbins line.
Really? Oh, I don't like
Just kidding. It's not, but I'm saying it sounds like that, and that's somehow to talk about I think one of my biggest understandings or things that I perceive as truth, and that's that there are many ways to succeed, and it's not about, most times it's not about the way, but it's about who's walking in it, or something like that, because this is something that came up a lot when we fundraise for Onti. So
Yeah.
you some people tell you must do like this because that's how you raise money, and the others tell you differently, and that's the opposite.
Yeah.
But that's a situation that you encounter basically everywhere, every time. And the problem, and I think that the challenge in this kind of situation is that usually, or at least in my experience about that, the position I came with gave the path a lot of force that it didn't. When you sit with the VC, you're coming to ask for money, so at the end of there's the position is that you come for their money, their advice. They are the ones that did it, although that's
Right.
not practically that's not always true.
Right.
So you have all the time this ambivalency about, okay, I'm here, I know what I'm doing, but wow, they're millionaires. And I think that's also something which is comes up a lot to me with raising the children, like
Right.
like that's a place where
Yeah,
where
I completely
feel
agree. By the way, I would say there's at least three things here. So you said the path and the people who are walking the path. I think there's a very important third part here, which is the objective,
yeah
right? And that's usually what they say. They say, don't look at where you're going, but look at how you're walking, right? So I think, and yeah, definitely raising the children is definitely there because, and I'm sorry that I'm bringing you back to the thing that we talked about, which is one son and 1 + 1 = 2. Um, the sentence is every way can lead to success. I think that it depends critically on how you define success.
yes
More than that, I think, and that's also connects to machine learning. If success is a measurable metric, let's say like on a 2-dimensional graph, then you can actually get there and then go back down and then go up. And so if you have an erratic random system that generates some kind of dynamic movement, you will at some point get to success, even if you're just randomizing stuff, right? So I think it's true that every way can lead to success. It really depends on how do you define success and how do you limit the.
I think maybe even the success is the success is a word that can be changed.
No, for sure. And again, and I'm telling you that usually when it comes to children, I used to say that for me, the success is getting them to 18 with 10 fingers and 10 toes, right? But the reality is, if one of my children loses a finger, it still won't be a failure, right? So it's about, or worse than that, if a child gets cancer and dies at the age of 5, you can't really look at it as a failure. It's an experience. So I think
but I'm talking here more about the lessons that you can give them than about your success as a parent.
Oh, okay.
Like I have a teenager. Everything seems so critical to her.
Yeah.
And the understanding of having that and getting
right.
And that's an understanding which is hard to it's easy to grasp, but I think it's harder to really adopt, because if every way almost can lead to success, it means that it loses a little bit of the meaning of the way that the place that you're going to.
Yeah, but
and
again,
that's again with the definition of what is success.
Right, and I think again, every way can lead to success. Doesn't mean that whatever you do, you're going to succeed. It means that
by the fourth of these, the $1 million is going to.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, that there's a way for you to optimize your own personal experience.
Yes.
As you walk through the path, whatever path is. Okay.
So, and for the
what's the difference between starting fresh and jump starting yourself?
Well, jump starting is more about the process of how do you get there, and starting fresh, I think, is more about after you're there, what is the usage of the jumpstart, or how do you leverage that, or how do you like more about you're already there. What are the things to do? I don't know. I need to think about it.
All right.
It's good that we have a week until the next.
Yeah. What do we want to do next week?
Yeah. Well, first of all, by next week we might have something on personal very interesting for my side.
If you can talk about it. Yeah.
If I can talk about it, yeah.
Do you want to pick up something?
I would pick up with the personal. I would start with the personal.
We need
Yeah.
something specific though. Okay, let's
Let's
work
think
this
about
week.
it. But I would start with the personal. Maybe not. Yeah, maybe with your.
Let's
I'm thinking of maybe to do like the opposite episode in Seinfeld, like to have the starting point where we met and then because I met you just when you came back from Portugal or something like that.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
you did. Yeah.
I think after you went to.
Yeah.
So then it would be like that could.
All
be
right, let's work on it this week
Yeah.
and find something and then.
And we
So
have
next
to-
week we're basically doing our first episode
Yes, at your place.
at my place.
Do they work on Fridays?
Who?
No, no. We've been there last Friday and they didn't work.
No work on
The
Fridays.
construction
No.
areas.
No work on Fridays. They worked like only 2 days this week. I don't know. All right, you want to sign off? Doesn't matter. You have an hour and a half of video.
Nice.
Yeah. We should probably sign off, but today it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Um,